Hey guys, I see that there's already talk about what the most desired topic to discuss. There's already talk about it in the chat, and I'm being a little careful about it because it was brought to my attention by a fellow Leaf that we have some issues with some incoming censorship bills in Canada, which can make it very risky about what to say about certain things, and to avoid, anything that could be deemed as hate speech. So, even though I would very much like to talk about it, and as a matter of fact, originally I had planned to do this stream on what happened, because there were some weird parallels with what this guy was saying versus what I've said as well. But again, because of the concerns about, I don't want to end up getting flagged, I'm going to be a lot more careful with how I discuss this. First of all, there is nothing whatsoever, by any way, humorous about any kind of attack on individuals, particularly individuals of certain Semitic faiths, that just so happened to be outside of the headquarters of pornographic industries, being shot by police officers of the womb holding or womb possessing persuasion. There's nothing funny about that at all. Okay, it's very tragic, and I just saw a article about how there was like a huge Semitic community meeting and public ceremony about the death of this gentleman who was named Mizrachi, like the famous Mizrachi of all the goyim must be killed fame. And it was very tragic. There was a lot of oi gewalding and how must we suffer so, and it's another I'm going to be... I also want to bring attention to the great tragedy, the loss of this heroic French-Canadian police officer named Mohammed, who gave his life in the line of duty. We have to have a moment of silence for him. But... Oh... Yeah. You couldn't have constructed a scenario more meme-worthy and ironic. You really couldn't. Unfortunately, I had a copy of this guy's... I don't even want to use the word. I had a copy of this guy's writings that I was going to go through and critique, actually, because he came to some different conclusions than what I came to, obviously. Even though he had some initial ideas that were similar to mine. And another thing that you noticed about him is that in the first page of his writings, he discussed how he didn't want this to be the source of unrest in all these parts of the world, but he wanted it translated into Hindi, Arabic, Chinese, all these other languages. Like, you realize that this guy is very socially isolated and probably megalomaniacal, or has like this insane what's the complex where you have like a massively inflated sense of your importance? I mean, it is megalomaniacal, but it didn't turn out the way that he thought it did. It's kind of interesting because, like, when this thing initially happened, before we got more of the details about who was being shot, the big discussion was about female police officers and their effectiveness. And this is actually something that's been known for a while. Like, if you look at certain body cams, it was narcissistic, yeah. If you look at certain body cams of female police officers, you will see that they are very eager to take shots. Like, they're very trigger happy. And of course that makes sense because women are much more physically vulnerable than men. And therefore, and by the way, this is what got me instantly fired once when I said that women are physically different from men. Apparently that's where Canada's in like woke North Korea mode, where you can't even imply that men and women have physical differences, or else that's grounds for immediate termination. And I wasn't even aware of that. I know I talked about that in a previous stream. But, where was I going with that? So, like, oh yeah, so women have these physical differences. They're much more physically vulnerable than men. That's going to naturally cause them to be more inclined to shoot when they feel threatened. Just because they don't have the physical presence. It's just a statement of fact, right? Wait, was this a Jeet Foyd? I didn't even check the race of the woman. Was it? That would be so insane if it was. Oh my god. That'd be even more perfect. But, and actually, here's a slightly... maybe a slightly anachronistic, or what's the term? Idiosyncratic, that's the word I'm looking for. Slightly idiosyncratic opinion when it comes to female officers. I do actually think that there is a place for them in the police force. And before you all get typing in the comment section saying, "Oh, Mercer's a libtard retard." What I mean is that in certain domestic situations where there's children involved, you could see a role for female police officers in dealing with the children. I would not have them in any other role. Like, I wouldn't actually have them in any kind of frontline situation. They would be coming in behind the male officers, and specifically their task would be to deal with the children, and that would be the only role that I would see them as a group being suitable for. But it was funny because initially, oh yeah, the Jeet, oh yeah. But initially, when the shooting happened, it was all about how... No, by the way, I'm not laughing. I'm actually weeping. Okay, this struck so close to home to me. I think Montreal's like a 12-hour drive from me or something. So it's very close to home. That I just periodically am breaking down into sobbing. So, like I'm sobbing right now. And allegedly the two cops engaged with the shooter. The shooter shot the male cop, the French-Canadian named Mohammed, and he went down. And then the Floyd, fuck, I shouldn't even say that on stream. I'm getting really paranoid about what I can and cannot say on streams now. It's really irritating, man. Anyways, the female police officer then ran from the suspect, and there was apparently a man of the Semitic religion persuasion that approached from an angle or something with the intention of helping her, and she actually turned around and shot him. As I've been making jokes about, if you're going to be a criminal, you got to make sure in Canada you have to make sure that you're committing your crimes near a synagogue, because if there's any female police officers on the scene, you know that you got some bodies to take some shots for you before she goes after you, right? But, yeah, it's tragic. And actually, another funny thing about this that I noticed, like, you do see some articles about this in the news. Like, you'll see the CBC and a few other news stations do the typical, this was an Inkwell shooting, blah, blah, blah. But you don't actually see a lot of political mobilization around it. Like, if you guys remember, back in when was the Alec Manassian attack? Was it like 2017? I think. Actually, I'm gonna look that up. Alec Manassian. Let's see here. 2018 Toronto van attack. Okay, so it was in 2018. So when that attack happened, I remember there was a massive crackdown on all of our spaces. Like, it immediately, all the Reddits, like this, we used to have peak brain cells. Like, we had tons of great stuff on brain cells. Immediately there was a crackdown. Shut all that shit down. And then, you started to see like government bodies starting to organize and spy on Inkies. And this is when we became really paranoid for a period of time. Because obviously, I don't even think, even though we make memes about ER, nobody really... you can find people that will say that they supported him, but in practice, most of us were like, no, this guy's just shooting above his... A, he's not neurotypical, he's autistic. B, he's attempting to get blonde Stacy's, basically. And this is why he's failing. And he's lashing out because of that. Like, he could have easily gotten a Rice Void. He was rich, he was decent looking. Like, that was the general consensus. Like, when you'd actually talk to the more intelligent Inkies. But even then, ER and then the Alec Manassian attack, there was like an organized police response to it. And there was like politically motivated crackdowns on internet spaces. But we haven't really seen the same thing. Now, it might be because it's just been so long since there was one of these things that happened. Though I would argue that, and I made this argument all the way back in 2021, I think, is when I made my first video. I made the argument what you would see with these guys, like you would see growth of these guys exponentially over the next 10 years, which we've seen in the first 5 since I made my first video. But I said, for the most part, you're not going to see them acting as Inkies. Like, it's this guy who just went on this attack. He was an outlier to a great degree. Like, we haven't seen anything like that since Alec Manassian, right? But for the most part, they're going to get filtered into political spaces. Like, they're going to have the same kind of radicalism and basically self-deletion mindset, where they're basically going to go on a rampage, or they're going to try and take someone out and then take themselves out. But what's funny is that you actually have seen this more on the political left than on the right. Like, if you think about the guy who took a shot at Trump, what was his name? Crooks, I think? Like, the guy was a true cell, like Crooks. Crooks, Trump shooter. Let me pull this guy up. Because he is a real goblin. Yeah, here he is. Oh, hang on. This guy. Like, he was a real goblin. Like, he was a genuine subhuman. Like, okay, there's a lot of guys who'll be like, it's over for me, I'm short, or it's over for me, I'm sub 5. And if you look at them, they're actually not really sub 5. Like, they're maybe average, but they have, like, neurotypical related issues. This guy was genuinely ugly. Like, he looks not good in his front profile, but his side profile was completely fucked. Like, he was just... And what a surprise, he went on that attack. Here he is. Yeah, look at this. Like, come on. I don't even think, like, JBW and C would save him. Because he's, yeah. But what did he do? He obviously had no attachment or connection to Inkiedom, right? He went on a left-wing motivated attack on Trump, right? And it becomes a little more debatable with the Charlie Kirk shooter. I would say that he's not... I wouldn't say he's ugly per se. Robinson or whatever. Tyler Robinson, I think his name is. I don't think he was ugly per se. He was not good looking, though, and he was not neurotypical either. Like, he was an autist. Confirmed. Good jawline to waist. Come on, man. Come on. Come on. It's... when you have a side profile like that, and it's all like... He looks like a hobgoblin. It's over for him. Like, nothing could really... I don't even know how you could fix that with surgery. Because there's so many things wrong. He has, like, the forward jaw projection. He has, like, the Habsburg jaw. But then he has, like, a tiny fucked up nose. And I think he was asymmetrical as well. Yeah, he's, like, asymmetrical as well. And, like, a pushed-in nose. Like, this is... Dude, there's this weird thing I've noticed with the United States... in the Midwest, there seems to be these really bizarre looking, I don't know if they're like ethnic hybrids of like Germans, Anglos, and random specks of other European ethnicities, but you got some really weird looking people in certain parts of the United States, like weird looking white people, I mean, in certain parts of the United States. Now, that's... To be fair, I mean, you do kind of see weird looking people as you go further into the interior of Canada as well. But, you know, it's like, I could not place this guy's ethnicity. Like, if you were to tell me, like, or if you were to ask me to guess where this guy's ancestry came from, I could not tell you. Because he just doesn't really, actually, no, that's not true, actually, I just realized something. Okay, I may be full of shit. Let me pull this up. He looks like this guy. This guy is a bell beaker culture, reconstruction of a bell beaker culture person from Great Britain. But this is from like 2000 BC. And this guy was suffered from like multiple nutritional deficiencies that partially caused his facial malformation. So actually, I'm full of shit. He does look like a Bronze Age A Bronze Age Aryan from the 2000 BC. These are the men that invaded Britain and wiped out all the Neolithics on the island. It's the lineage of kings. He was one chromosome away from SMV mogging the whole chat. Well, you know what's funny about that? It's like this study that I found where it was comparing matches on dating apps for men and women and black and white. So it was comparing black men, black women, white men, white women. And white men got like 8% match, and I think black men got like 6.5% of a match rate. So it was slightly higher for whites. It was like 1.5% higher in terms of absolute numbers. In relative numbers, if you do the math, and this, by the way, these are the games that people will play with chances of getting a match on dating. This is why dating statistics are not really that useful for dating apps and also online dating, because they'll use these percentages. And if you think about it, 8% divided by 6.5%, that means a 23% higher chance of matching. Oh, Gultist, you sent me a $43. What do we got here? Thank you very much. Actually, I should pull up my stream elements. Oh, is it just a... I don't see a message attached to it. Oh, here we are. I see it now. Keep up your great work. Your streams are always peak. Have you ever watched the YouTube channel El Rod? His stuff is amazing. If you could unblock me on Discord, or should I message you? Yeah, I could let you back in. I'll figure that out after the stream. But yeah, no video chats. All right, we can't be posting very specifically American freedoms. You can't post American style Second Amendment stuff on video camera in countries where that's considered illegal. Just to be very careful, very safe. I don't like being like brutal policer of Discord, but it's very easy to get shit banned. Anyways, I got pulled off of what I was saying. Oh, yeah. So there's this dating study, and it was like 6.5 to 8%. And that means that white men had a 23% higher match rate than black men, which sounds big, but in terms of absolute numbers, it was a difference of 1.5%. White men matched 8% of the time, black men matched 6.5% of the time. And I may even be slightly off on that. It might even be less of a disparity than that. If you look at black women versus white women, black women matched 40%, 40% of the time. White women matched 60% of the time, 60. So the gap between men and women is vastly, vastly larger than the gap between the different races, if you look at the actual numbers. So yeah, if this guy was a Foyd, he would absolutely have no problems. And actually, that's something else I wanted to talk about, because I've been working full-time for a couple of weeks now, and my commute actually brings me to a mall where I am able to observe people. And I've made some observations that I'd like to talk about, because the city I'm in is not totally diverse, but it's not totally white either. I would say it's about 70% white, 30% diverse, mostly Indians. If you subtract the Indians, it's pretty much all white, except for like 15-20% non-white population. And that gives me a good basis to judge the different just be X, just be Y, just be Z theories that people talk about. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. As of right now, yeah, this guy, if he was a Foyd, he would have had no problems, without a question. You can make profile pics with a 7-year-old woman and get matches like crazy. Yeah, and what you will see is, and I got banned from this account that I had from a group chat that had a bunch of feminists in it. I had a LARPing Foyd account on X that got sniffed out, so I ended up getting banned. But I was able to get into these femcel / rad fem circles, including group chats. And I would see them talk about stuff like this. And what they would say is, oh yeah, we can get all sorts of matches on dating apps, but the quality is super duper low. I'm like, yeah, that's true. But for guys, the quality is super duper low, and the match rate is almost non-existent. Like, that's been my experience. There was one time when Medican was still doing streams with multiple people where we went on dating apps and we would just go through the app and like look at some of the horrifying profiles and roast them. And yeah, like, and you'd realize, like, we'd make fun of these bitches that had, well, here, actually, I think I still have some saved. I'll see if I can pull them up. Hold on. You'd have chicks like this. Like this. Jen, you could have saved our shooter. You could have saved him. All he needed was a based void. But it's like we would make fun of these chicks. But the reality was, like, guaranteed most of them wouldn't even swipe on us anyways. So it was futile in a lot of ways. It was sort of satisfying to do it, but it was futile because we knew that we wouldn't get anything, right? How did they even sniff you out? I think I was offering opinions in a way that was not... Well, actually, you know what it was? They would talk about their periods and their cycles, and it became noticeable that I wouldn't talk about anything related to that because I don't really understand how it works. Like, I understand how it works biologically, but I don't understand it from the insider point of view. And this is one of the ways they sniff out Transformers as well. So eventually I got found out, but it did kind of suck. Something I wanted to ask you about. Were they talking about theories or just LDR stuff? For the most part, you see them talking about... Because the group chat that I was most observant in was actually a right-wing group chat. It was... Because there are a branch of feminists that are anti-immigration mostly for... Like, they're not anti-immigration because they're, like, tribalistic, pro-white types. But they're anti-immigration because of the social and political impact it's having on women, right? So they're always worried about Muslims, for example, and other races of men that are causing problems. And they see white men as more like a devil you know sort of thing. Like, they'll say, oh yeah, white men are this and this and this. Like, there are all sorts of problems with white men, but it's just worse with these other groups, like that sort of thing. So most of the time they would talk about political stuff. Sometimes they would bring up stuff like Julius Evola or Friedrich Nietzsche. Like, they had some connections to the BAP sphere, Bronze Age pervert sphere. And so they would interact with some philosophical types. And there was always dudes in and out, like dudes actually identifying as dudes that would sort of circulate through these group chats as like visitors, basically, because they were aligned on political issues. But I didn't really see that much talking about woman-specific stuff. They would focus more on politics other than like basic feminist stuff. Or they would critique liberal feminists from like a non-liberal point of view, especially the ones that are pro-trans or that are pro-prostitution, that sort of thing. But it wouldn't be really deep stuff. Now, you said here the black pill feminist thing. Well, black pill feminism is actually quite different, because black pill feminism, they basically accept the conclusions that we come to when it comes to biological differences between men and women. Like, black pill feminists are sort of nihilistic doomers from the female perspective, because they see women as basically being, by their genetic predisposition, doomed to be dominated by men, like, sooner or later at some point. And so if you look at how black pill feminists talk about the situation. They'll say, we have the misogynists in the right wing who want to take away our rights and are hostile to us and want to enslave us. And then we have the misogynist brown people that are coming in, like Muslims and others, that want to enslave us due to their cultural norms. Right? So they see it as like they're doomed in that way. And they also have this, what you'll see a lot of them talk about, from their point of view, they believe that women are highly predisposed to be like pick-me's, as they call them, or to like submit to men in some way or another, or like always seeking male approval. It sounds strange because we're used to hearing it from the exact opposite point of view. We're used to hearing women, like men, constantly seeking the approval of women and begging for their support. And as soon as you see a woman start to say e-trad stuff, like guys, I mean, it's gotten better now, but guys used to be horrible about it, where they would just constantly gas up these chicks. Like you, obviously, look what happened with Sarah Stock. Like Sarah Stock was full of shit, right? I mean, I could have told you that because she's a Leaffoid. I could have told you. I guarantee her dating record is also not. It's not ivory white, you know. I'm sure. Now, I don't have any evidence of that. But I'm just saying, like, it's knowing what I know about Leafs, it's unlikely. Especially if she's attractive and she's in a big city. But yeah, it blew up in her face, and that happens every single time. It happens again and again and again. And finally, they're starting to wise up to it, but then it creates an issue, because how do you stabilize a political movement without any women in it? You know, because you can't reproduce yourselves. Like, in order to create an alternative, like, countercultural or political movement, you need to have people, men in particular, that feel like there's some future that they can fulfill within this identity. And if there's no women, it's, you know, it kind of reminds me of Lord of the Rings. You know, in Lord of the Rings, how there's the Ents, and one day all the Ent wives just disappeared. And the Ents just carried on existing, but they couldn't perpetuate themselves. So they just resigned themselves to centuries of bed rotting, more or less. Because what can you do if you don't have any women? You know? And the right wing is in the same position. And this is what I was talking about when I was, and I know that it seemed kind of irritating where I was talking about that Indian Foyd who was doing the interview with the, I think she was like part Puerto Rican or something, and they were shitting on white women. And the reason why I was focusing on that is because I see that as a split direction that it could go in, where you see these ethnic Foyds like trad maxing to compete with white Foyds for this particular subgroup of white men. Now, obviously, they don't mean the average. Like, it's not like they're going after 5'8", you know, recessed chin white guys, right? Like, they want the attractive ones, but there are attractive ones in these circles. As a matter of fact, it's not unusual to find guys that are like 6+ out of 10. Like white guys, I mean 6+ out of 10, that are in these far right circles because they're socially isolated, and as a result, they don't have any experience with women. Well, if you're a Foyd who wants a guy who's most likely not going to cheat on her, like you're trying to min-max that, but you also want him to be attractive, going into these niche circles where there's almost no women involved due to it being repugnant to women, that's one of the strategies that you can pursue. Right? So we could see something emerge like that, like a sort of split off, because I remember I would talk about the Chad nationalism that was going to be attempted by the right wing, which you still see some guys doing. Though I would say that's mostly a millennial thing. With Zoomers, they're much more divided. But yeah, we could see a split off group, I think. But then at that point, then it becomes like Latin America. It's like, well, okay, let's say that you get a political community of white guys who are white nationalists. It's ridiculous, even the concept. You get these white nationalists, but they have like non-white wives and they have mixed race kids. Okay, are the kids going to be white nationalists? How does that even work? It doesn't work. And it sort of creates a Latin America style situation where you'll have like 60% white Hispanics calling the 40% white Hispanics brown. And it just becomes like, it becomes almost absurd, right? So I don't know if that'll actually work. Or at least I don't think the racial component will survive. But it's a bit of a tangent. But Is A Manipulated Man by Esther Villar is a mandatory read. I think I had thumbed through that at one point, and then I had looked into Esther Villar's background. She was kind of a weird chick. She's a Jewish chick, actually. And she actually... she had a fetish every single time. Every single time. She had a fetish for German men, plausibly in certain political movements of the 20th century. Like that, I believe she was exposed for that. Like she would actually pursue former Mustache Man followers that were part of that. Because remember, I think she wrote that book in the 70s, right? So that was only 30 years after the war. So there were still guys that were alive and not too old that were actually members of that government, or that were like part of the military of that government. And she actually had multiple relationships with guys from that background. So already, when you read that book, you're already starting to get a little bit sus. Okay, first of all, she's of the Semitic, particular Semitic background. Second of all, she obviously has some weird neuroses-driven fetishes. Okay, and then third of all, I remember reading the book, and she sort of is like, the impression that you get is like, the man is carrying the world on his shoulders, and women, everything is sort of self-reflectively narcissistic. And there's something to that, but I don't like whenever, and this is another problem that I have with trads, because, for example, you'll see like criticism of white women doing something on X, let's say, which, by the way, this is something else I wanted to get into, but like X, the function of algorithms in X. There was a conversation I had on voice chat yesterday that was kind of illuminating about that. And it's a phenomenon I've noticed myself. But I'll segue into that. But just to start with this, you'll see like a post where white women are being criticized for something they're doing or saying, like some libtard shit, whatever, or just their behavior. And then you'll get guys in the comments saying, why are you attacking these women? They can't help themselves. They're being brainwashed. And I don't know, it's ironic, because in a way I have more respect, I suppose, in a way, for these women than these guys do, because I don't believe that they're just helplessly following commands from a brain chip installed in their brains or something like that, or that they're just like, whatever the dominant narrative will be, they're just going to mindlessly conform to it. I don't believe that at all. Like, I think that women are personally responsible for their decisions, including when it comes to political decisions. I do think that women are more influenced by consensus building than men are. Women are much more pulled towards the consensus of like what women generally believe, because they want to be more socially accepted than men. That is true. But they're also following their interests. And you see this phenomenon everywhere you go where women have political power, or like women are acting as a distinct political group. You see it in South Korea. You see it in India. You see it in Western countries. Increasingly, you're going to see it in Eastern European countries. And it makes sense. Like, why would... Like, if a white woman supports nationalism for her own men, and a nationalist government comes into power, that government, because it's a nationalist government, it's like the focus of the government is going to be on fighting age men, because that's going to be their primary support base. And political power, unlike economic power, because you can make an argument, you can make a sort of like a trickle-down argument that like if you bring in economic immigrants, let's say, you can make the argument that if they're economically productive, they could produce more wealth than and this would create more jobs, and therefore it's not a zero-sum game. You could make that argument. There's some problems with that argument, but you can make that argument. But when it comes to political power, it's 100% a zero-sum game. Okay, if one group gains more political influence, by having a government in power that is reflective of their, like, that is their support base, by definition, this is reducing the power of people outside of that support base. And you would start seeing, like with a nationalist government, they would start looking at economically empowering young men of their own background, right? Obviously, it would be white men with European countries. It would probably be, I would say in America, a nationalist movement wouldn't be as white-focused if it were to succeed. But in Europe, definitely, it would be young white men, right? Non-elite white men would be the beneficiaries. And this doesn't benefit women because women, like the reason why they can be independent from us is because they're given this institutional support, this economic support, like DEI. There was this, actually, I'm going to pull this up now. There was a study by let me see here. Let's see. Here we are. Look at this. This is gender DEI confirmed in the STEM tenure. What we found shocked us. Women had an overall 2-to-1 advantage in being ranked first for the job in all fields studied. This preference for women was expressed equally by male and female faculty members, with the single exception of male economists who were more gender neutral in their preferences. In some conditions, women's advantage reached 4-to-1. When women were compared with men who shared the same lifestyle, advantages accrued to women in all demographic groups, including single or married women without children, married women with preschoolers, and divorced mothers. 2-to-1 hiring preference. Okay, and here's something that's kind of crazy about this. Because this is institutionalized now, it's not just being imposed by the government on these corporations, and they just begrudgingly go along with it because they have to. Like, you have the DEI hires have now integrated themselves into the administrative and leadership roles of these companies. And so they're actually acting of their own accord. Like, even if you were to abolish DEI tomorrow, these companies would still practice it. You would actually have to actively attack them. You would have to basically do the reverse. You would have to start going after them for not hiring white men. That would be the only way to do it. You would have to either break these companies down, like break the leadership down, or you would need to support other companies, newer companies, to replace them. There's no way that white women would support that. Like, why would they? Like, this doesn't benefit them at all. All right? I mean, I think the argument that they want access to foreign men is a little more tenuous. I mean, there's truth to that to some degree. I don't think they're opposed to having an alternative options, but then it comes with the side effect of having to deal with problem immigrants, right? Especially in Europe. But I think for the most part, they see it as a collateral damage. They see it as an acceptable loss where, some women will get assaulted in the streets or whatever, the grooming gang stuff out of the UK, that sort of stuff. But those are considered acceptable losses because the alternative is losing their privileges under this current liberal democratic system. White women believe they'll be accepted by marginalized groups. Yeah, some of them do. Well, it's kind of ambiguous, Like I was talking about this on that stream involving the Albanian woman and the Indian or Nepalese guy in J.P. Morgan, where he was making all these crazy accusations. Where it becomes ambiguous, like which group is more higher up on the progressive stack? Is it white women, or is it these ethnic guys? Like, I'm pretty sure if it was black man versus white woman in that kind of position, probably the black man would come out over top because of the unique position blacks have in progressive hierarchies. Other races, I would say it's more ambiguous. I would say probably other races of men, like Asian men, for example, Indian men. You'd have to have a pretty solid case if you wanted to beat white women on the progressive stack. And actually, it's funny because if you look at the if you look at the effects of DEI, okay, like, yes, okay, DEI gives some pretty big advantages if you're black, some advantages if you're Hispanic, but other than that, not really that much for other ethnicities of men. And then furthermore, black men make up what, like 12-13% of the male population in the US, and Hispanic men are like another 20%. And Hispanics don't get as much of a DEI boost as blacks do. So it's not like they themselves have a huge impact. And also, if you look at the education rates, like even though black men, like if you're in STEM and you're black, you will get a pretty big boost relative to non-blacks. The number of black men in STEM is relatively small. Okay, like even like the number of black men that are in higher education is proportionally small. So in terms of the actual impact of these DEI policies by race, they're not actually as severe as you might think. Like there are some carve-outs, like there's a lot of government jobs that'll go to black women. There's certain, like for example, the post office tends to have a lot of blacks in it. But if you actually look at where DEI is hitting the hardest, it's the male versus female thing. Because white women have a higher rate of college graduation than white men. Right? Even though they typically don't get as many STEM-focused degrees, they still have a higher graduation rate, which means all the jobs that are not necessarily explicitly STEM, that are like engineering or whatever, all the jobs that are, say, middle management or director of XYZ, like the sort of paper-pushing jobs, as we call them, the adult daycare jobs, like those are going to be dominated by white women because white women have the educational attainment. Black women as well, if they can get into it. But again, it's like similar to black men where, well, actually, I think their college graduation rate's pretty good. But like if you actually look at the meaningful impact, like another good example of this actually is Asian women. Asian women in the West Coast, the tech industry in California, because they tend to be a little better at math than white women, so they're more likely to get into STEM, like proper STEM, and you see them all over these startups where you'll see like an Asian woman put in some very visible position, and they'll be making hundreds of thousands of dollars. So women actually benefit much more from affirmative action DEI than blacks do or Hispanics. I've seen women of all ethnicities fetishize Korean men. I never see women under 30 lust after white men. Yeah, I haven't seen it in up here. I mean, actually, I should talk about this because I have been making observations of the mall near where I live, which is I would say it's a middle class area. It's nicer than the main inner city, so it's not like it's a little more upscale in terms of income. Not like wealthy by any stretch, but it's like middle to slightly upper middle class. And it's mostly white. And what I've noticed is, first of all, there are millennials that are looks matched. And I'm talking older millennials that are looks matched across the look spectrum. So they could go anything from like totally subhuman to really attractive. And they all have kids, too. Like, there's a lot of families, actually. A surprising number of white families. And overwhelmingly, the kids are white. Because it's white couple. But this is millennials, right? If you look at Zoomers, you see a sort of different thing emerge, where you see good-looking white Zoomer guys are going to be with equally attractive white Zoomer girls, from what I've seen. Whereas these like 5 and below white Zoomer guys are virtually absent. You don't actually see many white Zoomer 5 and below, average and below average at all. You do see 5 and below average, like average and below average white girls in the malls. You just don't see the boys. And it's very noticeable. And you will see ethnics or like black guys with white girls from time to time, but typically it is in this group of like 5 and below. Like it's pretty rare to see, I would say 6+. Usually they're with an equally attractive or even more attractive white Zoomer guy. So there does seem to be this deficit of 5 and below. And my conclusion from this is that I think there's a lot of demoralization specifically for white Zoomers due to the cultural hostility the left has had towards straight white men in particular. There's a lot of demoralization where these guys who are average and below average, they just stay home and they bed rot. The girls don't feel this because they're part of the progressive coalition as long as they throw white men under the bus and they identify as feminists and they're opposed to the patriarchy. In that regard, they're able to be, like, their identity is seen as something positive to them. Right? They don't have an inherently negative identity. The way that if you're white, you're basically a bad person if you're white. Like, that's, if you look at how progressives conceptualize things, like, you have to denounce your own identity in order to be a good person if you're a white man. And for the millennials, we were introduced to this stuff, like this kind of thing, fairly late, like I would say in high school and later. Because what I remember is when I was growing up as a kid, it was like the benchmark that I use for the social attitudes are the really popular TV shows at the time, like in the 90s and 2000s. So it was like Hey Arthur, for example. Hey Arthur was a... here, actually, I'll pull it up. Or no, not Hey Arthur, sorry. What the fuck is his name? Hey Arnold, that's it. Hey Arnold, that's it. I knew it was one of these weird A names. Arthur's the anthropomorphic animal. Okay, so this is what you would see. Oh, God damn it. Here we go. So this is sort of what you would see in the 90s and the 2000s, where the white kid would be the main character. He'd be a little bit introverted and not like a stereotypical jock type, somewhat nerdy. And he would have the black best friend who was like his sidekick. And they were projecting this idea of racial harmony. Like, we're all getting along now as individuals. We're not going to go after racial grievances. And this carried on until, I would say, the Obama years, the late Obama years, when Trayvon Martin happened with the... and that's the start of Black Lives Matter. That's when you started to see a really sharp edge towards white men in the media. And what was significant about the Trayvon Martin case was the identification of George Zimmerman as a white Hispanic. As a white Hispanic. And then you think, why is George Zimmerman being identified as a white Hispanic when he's obviously just a straight-up Hispanic? There's nothing white about him. Well, it's hard to say exactly where this thing started. I mean, there's evidence of there being a lot of propaganda against whites prior to that. But you could see it become really blatant by that point, is what I'm trying to say. And for us, we didn't grow up with that, right? I think it was right here. No, that's Obama's transgender thing. Because I remember I have some slides on this where I talked about it. Let me see here. Here. Yeah. Here we are. CNN's white Hispanic label for George Zimmerman draws fire. Right? Obviously, this guy's not a white Hispanic. Like, come on. Anyways, so around 2013 is where you started to see the shift. And by 2013, I was, let me think here. I was 21 in 2013. So I was already an adult when that started to shift. And so were most millennials, right? Because I'm a younger millennial. Zoomers grew up with this sort of stuff imposed on their identity from a very young age. You know, and I think this has affected the psychology of the boys in particular, where they're becoming a lot more introverted, a lot more anxious, low self-esteem, I would say, is an important thing. And it's interesting because I remember reading about self-esteem, self-described self-esteem by blacks and whites before the civil rights movement and after the civil rights movement in America. Self-esteem for blacks was actually lower than whites for in terms of self-esteem before the civil rights era. They actually had a lower sense of self-worth. And this is remarkable because one of the things you'll hear from race realist Twitter is how blacks having an inherently higher self-esteem than whites is evidence of a psychological difference between the races, right? But the reality was blacks had lower self-esteem than whites before civil rights, and then it became higher than whites after civil rights. And it's interesting because it reminded me of, let me see here. It reminded me of this. So this is from social identity theory. It is one of my favorite psychological theories to talk about in my videos. To maintain self-esteem, an individual will want to compare their in-group to a lower status out-group. Well, I mean, if you're living in traditional America, which is pre-civil rights America, blacks were seen as an out-group that was low status. And so you could make positive comparisons of yourself against them. You started to see that politically invert after civil rights, where blacks became sort of the symbol of the new American identity for, where the entire history pre-civil rights of America was seen as evil, effectively. And America was redeeming itself. It was almost like a new country began after civil rights. And the founding ideology of it was the rebuke of this previous system. And it's not a surprise that you see the self-esteem of the two groups invert, because now I think whites have moved from the in-group to the out-group of this society, and blacks, at least to some extent, as part of like a coalition of groups, is part of the in-group now. And so, as I said, I mean, it's very odd. It's either the 5 and below white kids are staying home and just not interacting, or for some reason, white Zoomers are just way more attractive now than they were in the past, which I find unpersuasive. Possible, but I find it unpersuasive. But yeah, that's something that I noticed. You say you grew up around brownoids, you never had white guilt. Well, I mean, not everyone does, but a lot of people do, right? I kind of never interacted with it directly myself because, again, we didn't really have blacks or other races. We didn't have slavery in Canada, so we didn't have that narrative. But you could see it filtering in through the culture, right? Like, it was very much like blacks went from this sort of goofy sidekick role to occupying a really powerful cultural mainstream. And though I wouldn't say that whites were culturally attacked per se. Like you didn't necessarily see like anti-white music or anti-white. Well, you did see some anti-white movies, but you didn't really see anti-white music per se. But you did see in academia whites being attacked, and over time, this I think has an effect. Why go outside as an inky? I only go for groceries, gym, or work. Well, I didn't really have a choice, unfortunately, because I'm working right now, and my commute has me stop at a mall. And depending on the transit, I may have to wait, because I'm waiting until I can buy a proper vehicle, so I'm not able to, so I have to take public transit right now. And that sounds bad, but you have to remember we don't have the same issues with public transit that America does, right? So our transit is very safe. You don't really have to worry about things happening to you. Though another factor is in a lot of cities now, in Canada at least, you see a lot of meth heads and druggies. Like there are a lot of them. They become like a permanent fixture. And this is only a thing over the last, I would say since COVID. I don't remember these people. Like when I was growing up, I never saw homeless people. They just weren't around. They weren't a thing. Now they're everywhere. And they're drug addicts, of course. And for the most part, they're white up here. Like big cities will look like cities like Portland Or Seattle. Well, Portland's like one of the worst, right? And Toronto will look more like LA or New York or Philadelphia, right? Where you just see drug addicts everywhere. It's, and yeah, actually, you know what's funny about that? I'll tell you one thing I noticed. You don't see a lot of druggy homeless people, homeless guys that do not have girlfriends. They got druggy homeless girlfriends, though. So, but, I mean, it's an option, right? I mean, they're doing better than I am, right? Their score is higher than mine. Do immigrants ask for credit immediately after arriving in Canada? Yeah, they can get credit. As a matter of fact, this is one of the major problems because we have this student visa scam where you'll have these mostly Indians applying to these scam colleges for like a hospitality diploma or whatever. And the goal is they want to work for 3 years in their field, and that makes you eligible for PR. So it's like a shortcut around our immigration system. But the problem is that they can't get jobs in those fields because there are no jobs in those fields, like whatever they're taking. Like they'll take like marketing or whatever, but they'll be working at fast food places. And so what they'll do if they find that they cannot get PR and they're forced to go home back to India, they'll just max out their credit cards. They'll get like $20,000 line of credit. They'll max it out and then just leave as like an FU to the country. And yeah, like credit is extremely loose in Canada. Or it was. I don't know if it still is now, but it was extremely loose. And I know guys who actually did this. Like I know multiple guys who are no longer in Canada now, but they were in Canada and they just took out these huge lines of credit as soon as they realized they couldn't stay and fucked right off out of the country. Yeah. But you do see this sort of demoralization, and I think the way that women perceive it is they see it kind of like a status thing, right? Because if you're perceiving your own group of men as being the homeless people, or overrepresented as homeless on the streets and drug addicts and whatever, that's going to result in you perceiving your men as lower status. And now I'm not somebody who believes that status is more important than looks. Obviously, looks can get you anywhere, but the relative status of a group can influence the margins, right? So guys who would be less attractive due to their race without taking looks into a factor here would end up getting marginally pushed ahead. And I have seen that. I have seen cases, particularly of the youngest, like 18-year-olds. I have seen weird cases of 18-year-old girls with like Indian guys that are like that they mog. And I've also seen weird cases where they will get with there was this one case I remember seeing near a college where this attractive white woman was buying lunch for this fat, shorter than her Asian guy. Like he looked like the kind of guy that would be playing League of Legends for 72 hours straight and then dying. You know, but this white woman was actually buying lunch for him. I was like, what the fuck is going on here? It was really bizarre. But I mean, if the women perceive the men as low status, they'll defect to other groups of men. And yeah, there's you're talking about if I'm reacting to things. Yeah, I was just rambling a little bit, but I am going to be reacting to this guy here. This is a recent addition to Daily Wire called Matt Nuclear. And I'm not really going to be laughing at him because I don't really care that much about right-wing social media shit. Like, I find it kind of irrelevant. What was more important to me was actually his how he was using AI. So I'm going to read into this because this guy did a Unfuck America tour. He did a pretty big expose. It says here, now for the fun part. Yeah, Robert De Niro's son. That's the first thing I thought of, too. That was the first thing I thought of when I saw him. Robert De Niro's son. Apparently Robert De Niro's son is a tranny now, by the way. Anyways, whoops daisy. So it says, now for the fun part. Because, first of all, they went over his contract, but it's like, who cares about that? Now for the fun part. Welcome to the mind of Matt Nuclear. In this conversation, he uses Grok as a sounding board to talk about his success, the people who follow him on X, and his interactions with Ben Shapiro. He brags about how a bottom-of-the-barrel nobody follows him on X and starts to build an odd relationship with Grok. Well, this is interesting. Ben Shapiro himself texted, yeah, I mean, he's getting validation from this AI machine. And then he adds, by the way, I was on Ben's show like 8 months ago. It's even better than I thought. And then you go to the next one. Matt Nuclear spends so much time telling Grok about his accomplishments that we couldn't even fit the full conversation into a single tweet. We had to crop it. He literally asks Grok, hype me up a bit. And look at, he's writing actual essays here. And he's talking about like typical Zoomer stuff, like Zoomers are really fucked over economically. Look at how I'm comparing to them. Like, gas me up a little bit. And it was like, just go ahead and do it. And it says, bro, you're not crazy at all. This is straight up impressive as hell. Well, imagine using AI to help yourself up or hype yourself up. That's actually the point that I'm going for. Because that is the important part. He's actually relying on AI for social support and validation. And the question is this really that uncommon? Is it just a coincidence that he happens to be doing this? Or how many Zoomers are doing this? And this is what I was talking about on BC yesterday. And the impression that I got is that, and this is from guys that were on the server that were just basically admitting to me that this is actually remarkably common now. And actually, I looked up a study on this, and it was something like 26% of Gen Z has admitted to using these AI tools effectively as some kind of like intimate outlet. Not necessarily just a sexual outlet. Like, you know, most guys aren't really wired that way. But actually like intimate, like emotional support, almost like they're in a relationship with it. And yeah, he's just gassing himself up here. And then he's talking about achieving 4,000 subs. Dude, Gen Z, it's becoming way more common for them. And I think this is factoring into what I was describing about so many of them bed rotting. All right? I don't think this guy is an anomaly. That's what I'm getting at. Is look at my YouTube stats. I just started posting there. I'm already eligible for monetization. 185. Yeah, this is why I'm not monetized, by the way. $155 to $185 a month. Okay. That's not really worth the risk of having somebody manually check my YouTube and then discover that I'm an evil inky and immediately ban me. Oh, I've been here. Matt Nuclear leaked Grok chat highlights. I just received 261 after spending 250 on groceries. Cash in hand right now. You've already received 600, fully covered by your Orthodox Jewish friend. Yeah, no, I've been there. But you can kind of see this weird stuff. I like you. You're more witty and less apologetic. Like, they're interacting with them as people. And then it also occurred to me, this is something that I've noticed with X. That I've been getting fed stuff algorithmically that pisses me off. And it'll be stuff, typically it'll be like related to white women behaving in a bad way, you know. Or it'll be like some kind of rage bait post from Indians, like Indians versus anti-Indians. And it occurred to me, like, this isn't an active plan. The reason why I'm getting this in my feed is because I interact with it. And then I realized that there's a feedback loop going on here where I'm being fed things that I interact with, even though it's provoking my negative emotions, because that's what's provoking me to interact with it. But this is rewarding the algorithm, and so the algorithm pumps more of it into my feed. And then I began to wonder, how does this scale up systemically? Where you end up with entire groups of people that are far more aggravated and hostile against each other through these social networks than they otherwise would be if you just sat down and tried to be rational. And as a matter of fact, one of the biggest examples of this is not a male versus female thing. It's, we could look at it like Indians versus anti-Indians. Like if you look at how the India versus anti-India stuff got aggravated on X, like the Indian problem is real in terms of immigration, but the way that it's turned into an extreme hostility is very remarkable. And I think it's because what happens is you'll see somebody post an anti-Indian meme. Indians, because they're thin-skinned, will react to it and post their own memes. And then the anti-Indians will react to the Indians reacting to the anti-Indian post. And it becomes this massive feedback loop that creates this huge wave of hostility between these two groups. And it's funny because when I was talking to some other guys on my server about this, they were under the impression that this was a, like there could be like a conspiratorial element to this. Like there's an actual plan behind creating these aggravations between these groups. Whereas I'm sort of thinking, actually, it could be even worse than that. Because what if this is not actually a organized strategic plan, but this is just a systemic effect, right? And the systemic effect results in this thing just spinning on its own. It's like a machine that's just going in its own direction, that's feeding into itself. It's like the analogy that I used. There's a concept in astro. I don't know what the term would be, like not science fiction, but it's like speculative science called gray goo. And the idea is that you create a nanobot that only exists to replicate itself. And that this nanobot, because it has this directive to replicate itself, and it has like a mini factory, it's like a von Neumann probe where it has a mini factory within itself that it can manufacture its own, like it can replicate itself with its own parts just by harvesting resources. You'll end up with like the entire universe getting completely consumed to create these nanobots, and it creates like a gray goo that completely overwhelms the universe in terms of material, matter. And you kind of see this in the same way that, like you see the way that the algorithms are reacting, because it's feeding me stuff that I know is going to aggravate me. It's going to just, and actually what I've noticed is that it's made me a lot angrier in general, just having to go on X and interact with X. I've actually reduced my amount of time that I spent on X, because I find all it does is it feeds me things that make me feel shitty or make me feel angry, you know? And it makes me feel hostile towards people that I was not hostile to before, right? And yes, the India problem, to a large extent, it's self-inflicted, right? I mean, they will look. I have plenty of memes myself, because they'll do things that they'll take videos of themselves being shit on by cows. Okay, like that's really insane. But you know, if they were just in their own country, it would just be like a ha wow thing. And another thing to consider is if you were a social media manager, and, for example, let's say that you wanted to facilitate the mass migration of Indians into Western countries, what you would want to do if you see that this is happening, that these hostile interactions between Americans and Canadians and Europeans and then Indians on the other side, you see this hostile reaction happening, the solution would be to put up a region lock to prevent them from interacting so that you don't inflame tensions, right? Because the strategy is you want to get as many Indians over to Western countries as possible to disrupt the demographics, and because they're safe for the certain Semitic community, because they worship the certain Semitic community, that they would be safer than other immigrant groups, right? But they don't do that. As a matter of fact, even though it's been suggested multiple times to put region locking on X, they've been very reticent on it. And I think it's because they're harvesting so much data, right? Because you have to input, especially if you're or what's it called, the X blue checkmark subscriber, you have to provide your information to X in order to get that subscription. Okay, so they know your date of birth, they'll know your nationality, they can infer a lot of things based on what you post about, especially if you post in politically related stuff. They can infer your own background through that. And then from there, they can see what you react to most intently. And this generates an enormous volume of data that they can make use of, you know? And then the side effect is this aggravation that's happening. But then again, maybe it's worth it, you know, for these people. And it just occurred to me, like something that was brought up by one of the people I was talking to on the voice call, was that this could result in people becoming extremely hostile to each other to the point where they self-isolate, like what we're seeing with a lot of Zoomers. And then they start interacting with AIs as a social outlet. And it results in what we're seeing now. Like, what was creepy about this Matt Nuclear guy's interactions with Grok, and what's implied with the other social media, the other chatbot, I think relative to ChatGPT, is that he's interacting with it like a person. Like, the suspension of disbelief is much stronger. For me, I've actually tried, like yesterday, what I tried to do was, because I was having this conversation about like the future trajectory of these chatbots, these like companion chatbots, I actually decided to download a couple of them and try them out to see if I could, like, they could suspend my disbelief in any way, right? Because I should be a candidate, right? Like, I've been like a stone cold true self for literally over a decade now, and you know, like no contact with Floyd's pretty much whatsoever. So I should be easily seduced by this thing. But I found it very difficult. Like, I tried my best, but I just don't understand how they're able to do it. But for some reason, with a lot of Zoomers, it's almost like because you grow up with internet access, the barrier between online and offline is much more blurred with Zoomers than it is with millennials, where we were exposed to being terminally online was really only a thing when we were already adults, you know? And I was just on the border of that cutoff. As a matter of fact, I remember exactly when it happened. It happened when I was around 16 or so. 15, 16. That was when World of Warcraft came out. And, no, I didn't start playing World of Warcraft until nearly when the first expansion came out. But I remember getting completely addicted to World of Warcraft. Completely addicted. To the point where, like, whenever I wasn't doing something else, like school-related, for example, I would just be playing World of Warcraft. You know, to the point where it would actually exhaust me mentally, just because it would. And it seems kind of crazy now when you look at it, but at the time it was mind-blowing being able to engage in this MMO environment, and it was like a completely separate universe that I existed in, where I could really suspend my disbelief about things. You know, like, it's not that I literally believed I was my character, but it was a lot easier to do that. And these Zoomers have grown up with that kind of technology, that kind of capacity, from basically the day that they were born, right? And I think it's because most of these guys are virgins, makes you thirst 10 times more. Maybe. I'm not so sure, though. Because I've also seen reports about, like, there's several cases now of people cheating, quote unquote, on their partners with AI. Like, having like an emotional affair, I guess you could say, with an AI chatbot. And then it actually, in many cases, it causes disruptions in their relationships. Like, you've seen multiple cases of this now. So I'm not so sure. Are autists shielded from it, using it as a person instead of just a tool? I think that might be the case. Though it depends on how much need you have, social need. Like, I know guys that I interact with who are in our sphere that are much more, like, they need social interaction to a much stronger degree than we do, or that I do, I should say. We being, like, people like myself. Like, I'm not somebody who really needs a lot of social interaction, but there are others that I know that really crave it, and really, if they don't have that interaction, it really affects their mental health. You know, And these are also the kind of guys who probably, if they were dating, they would have a really hard, like they would stay in a really shitty relationship just because they need that interaction, like that intimacy. And I would say that the type that I'm describing there is much, much more common than the type that doesn't really need the social interaction. So Zoomers are so starved for any positive interactions, they'll probably take what they can get and don't care. It's a machine telling them this. I make a habit of not listening to my own streams, so I will forget if I said something before, but I will say this again because this occurred to me of this Reddit post that I saw of this guy who was talking about how he was basically a loner loser kid who nobody interacted with, nobody cared about. He was basically invisible. And then he started LARPing as a girl in an online game. And everybody started treating him as a human being, basically. And they would go out of their way to help him. They would include him in everything. Like suddenly his social faux pas were no longer there. Like being awkward or saying something weird or whatever would be perceived as being cute and endearing as opposed to being weird and off-putting. Like it was a complete transformation. It was a completely alternate universe. And it eventually led him down to becoming like a transsexual at some point. I remember a Reddit post about that. And this was in like 2022 that I saw the post. So this is probably a Zoomer that had to grow up like that. And it always stuck with me, that story. Because I can I can empathize with it on a deep level. Obviously, I'm not... I've never LARPed as a Foid on video games to get free shit. Even if I was tempted to get free shit, I never felt a need to try that for social reasons. But I can empathize with you experience a completely different world suddenly. Like a completely different social world where you're a real person for the first time in your life. And actually, what's interesting about this is that you hear a similar thing from guys that have geomaxed successfully. And there's actually a phenomenon of guys who have spent like decades in Thailand, and they realize that this is going to be their last time there, and they'll actually self-delete rather than... Like, it'll be their last time there because maybe they've reached an age where they're no longer going to be able to afford those kind of trips or something like that. Like, you'll find that there's actually a phenomenon of these guys self-deleting in Thailand rather than going back. And it's because it's like a different world where they're a real person. Like, they can exist as a real person and not just this invisible economic unit. And, yeah, that was something that really sort of struck a chord with me. Even though, I don't have a direct connection to that, but I can empathize with the feeling of it, Yeah, more and more guys are going out of their way to date troons and femboys. Men are getting desperate. Oh, yeah, did you hear about Chud the Builder's? People have been posting that to me in my Discord server nonstop since that was exposed, and my answer has been the same. We have to protect our LGBTQ streamers from harassment and bigotry by transphobic black Americans. Trans lives matter, okay? Especially trans lovers' lives matter. But yeah, that's something that struck me as very strange with Zoomers. And oh yeah, here's one where he really starts to become like emotionally invested in it. He says, "Can I be honest? In a lot of ways, I'm very antisocial. Though you couldn't know it from my lives. I stay inside almost 100. Bro, we could tell by looking at you. You're one of us. Okay, you're one of us. I stay inside almost 100% of days unless I need to do something. I will occasionally hang out with a few friends, but they're in college and stuff, so I hardly talk to them. I don't want any romantic relationships right now." And he feels the need to justify this. This is what's interesting. "I see them as an extra hurdle plus stress to what I'm already doing." Sure you do. Sure you do. If that was true, it's a funny thing about these people that will say stuff like this. If this was true, they wouldn't feel the need to even say that in the first place. They would just say, I don't want any romantic relationships right now. They wouldn't feel the need to justify it. "I like watching movies, being epistemophilic, debating, playing video games, etc. I don't care about getting the newest shoe or newest shirt. I don't care about that stuff. I do love food, though. Yeah, we can kind of tell, bro. Spend 99% of my days in my room, but I don't view as depressing. I'm complacent in this. It's one of the reasons I don't go outside. But the added bonus of not being harassed by some angry guy that hates my views is also great, or worse. You know what's unfortunate is that I kind of, like, as I was reading this guy's screen caps, I started to get more and more sympathetic to him. Because I could feel that. That, in a lot of ways, that describes me, obviously without the coping. But I could sympathize with it. And of course, the reaction that he's going to get from that is, validation. And this whole thing came from there was a Grok URL that he exposed when he was typing something out on his stream, which that kind of happened to me too, actually, if you think about it. I had like a mini. You could see the city I was in because I opened up Google Maps and it zoned into my city. But yeah, it's sad because I do kind of sympathize with him. Yeah, diversity. We need more of this. Yeah, diversity is our strength. And it started to get, when we were getting into this conversation about the direction of this, how this was going to push more and more Zoomers into creating these virtual relationships with AIs, it became more and more speculative and more conspiratorial. Like there will be like competing AI god machines, and that you could plug yourself into. Like, let's say that you have a chip in your brain, and there's these like broadcasting mega networks of artificial superintelligence, and by the way, this would be actually a really good basis for like an anime or something, where you have this chip in your brain and you can tune into a certain augmented reality. And I was sort of thinking about it, and it would be really fascinating to have a story where, let's say you have a guy and he exists in this cyberpunk world where you get a chip in your brain and you tune into these mega AI machines that augment your reality with virtual people, and that depending on which super AI machine that you choose to tune into, the people and the entire vibe of the virtual world that is created or projected onto the real world is different. So I'm thinking sort of like Pokemon Go. You know how Pokemon Go, it would show the real world, obviously. It would go through your camera, but then it would create these Pokemon that you would throw Pokeballs at, right? And it would keep them persistent in a certain spot geographically. So it would be like if you had goggles on, you would see them, and it's almost like schizophrenia in some way. But it struck me like when we're able to generate virtual humans, and you could plug yourself into an augmented universe that has these virtual people, including people that are exactly what you're looking for, like what you want. And I don't just mean sexually. I mean like all the intimate needs that you could imagine, without the downsides of having to deal with somebody that, may not do things you like or be what you want at all times. That would be a really good basis for like a dystopian, like kind of like a Ready Player One style universe, or Blade Runner style universe. What's your plan, Mercer? Where are you going to passport bro at? Actually, this is something that I've been getting into. I'm looking at Brazil right now, and I think I've talked about it before, where Brazil has a lot. Look, all of these. There's no golden solution. Like, there's no country where everything is better than the country that you're currently in. It's all a matter of trade-offs. Okay, so Brazil is There's a lot of problems concerning crime, for example. There's the problem of figuring out how to support yourself remotely through some means or another while you're living over there. But in terms of the social culture, from what I've been described, people still interact in Latin America generally, including Brazil. They interact in person in a way that you just don't see anymore. It's very difficult to interact with people in Canada. And it's funny because when I was looking into Brazil as an option, I came across this Brazilian guy who was talking about living in Eastern Europe. And he was like a white Brazilian. Like if you saw him, you would think he was maybe a Southern European, like a Spaniard or something. So he wasn't even ethnic. He was pretty much white. And he was also decent looking too. And he looked like, I couldn't tell how tall he was, but he looked like he was not short. Like he had a build where he looked physically large, like not fat, but like physically broad. And he was talking about how like the people there just treat each other like shit. They treat you like shit. Like if you smile at people in Eastern Europe, they'll think that you're mentally retarded, literally. Like that's a phenomenon where they think if anyone's smiling for too long, there's something off in the head. And he was like, socially, it's awful. And I also found Brazilians, like videos on YouTube of Brazilians complaining about Canada and trying to date in Canada, like men and women. And they're saying that it's freaking awful, just because you can't. There's no spaces or contexts in which you can interact with unrelated people that you have no prior connection to. Like it's just seen as beyond the pale, you know. And I personally have experienced this. Unless you have some context to interact with somebody about, there's like this anxiety that you see growing whenever you try and talk to somebody, where they're like, because then they wonder, why is this person talking to me? You know, what's their scheme? What's their plan? It's a deeply, deeply cynical and just socially very unfriendly. I don't know where the idea of Canada being a friendly country comes from. Like you still find that sort of stuff in a few places, but we're talking rural communities where most people are old, and you'll have to also look like you're from the area, right? Like they'll interact with people that they think are either local to the area or that could be local to the area. Probably not so much if you're a foreigner. But other than that, like Canadian cities are absolutely fucking miserable to live in, right? Like it's weird. It's like you see these parallel societies of, like, you see Indians in where I am. They form their own sort of completely separate ecosystem where they're all interacting with each other. They're walking around in groups, talking with each other, whatever. They completely ignore the rest of us. And they're always talking in Punjabi, by the way. You hear Punjabi everywhere. And they are social in the way that they are in India. Like they're interacting the same way and it's much more, just from me perceiving them, just from what I see. Maybe it's different from their point of view, but it seems very socially warm and interactive with them. Whereas for us, it's just very much like you'll see people walking around in groups. Like you'll see maybe a group of 3 or 4 people at most that are doing their own thing, but they're all in these little segmented groups. There's nobody interacting with each other. I have not been to a bar in a long time in Canada. Like and as a matter of fact, I don't think I've been to a bar since COVID, because there was no reason to. The last time I went to a bar, it's actually really funny. The guy that the most interesting conversation I had was with a fucking Somali guy. Probably shouldn't be there because you shouldn't be drinking, right? If you're a Muslim. I don't know if he was, but I know he's a Somali. Based on his accent, he was born here. So I don't know if he's just an ex-Muslim or something, but we would just sort of chat a lot. And actually, he'd buy me drinks sometimes too. This is proof that my problems are not due to social issues, okay? I can actually get drinks bought for me at bars. It's never chicks. It's always other dudes. But it's because the conversation was so interesting to them that they were like, yeah, here, I'll get you a beer. Keep talking about what you're talking about. You know, so it can't be because I'm boring, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But first of all, there's always way more dudes than women in bars. This is something that I noticed. Like, it was always single guys or guys with their girlfriends. Girls, these days at least, don't go to bars on their own. And even this was back during COVID, so this was like 6 years ago. So it was still like millennials were still kind of young. You know, like now the median millennial is like 35 or 36 or something. So it was still relatively, it was like they're 30-year-olds. With Zoomers, they don't drink at all. So it's completely empty now. Like, I would actually be interesting to go to a club and see what the club scene is like. I've been told stories. There's one guy who's he's not Canadian. He's from the Middle East, but he was in Canada for a period of time, and he would go to clubs in where he was living, which was on the East Coast, and he would take photos of what was going on in the clubs, and you would see like. It was mostly white women with white guys, but the guys would be like a foot taller than them on average. A fucking foot taller than them. And you would see like random dudes just sort of hanging around in the sidelines. Were mostly like manlets or normal height white guys, and also ethnic guys. And really wouldn't see ethnic girls there as well. And you're saying it's mostly 28 to 40-year-old women at bars. I wish. Dude, last time I went to a bar, there was almost no women. Like, there was no single women. They were always with dudes. I should try going to a bar. Maybe I should do that as like an experiment. I'll get a GoPro camera, and I'll just hook myself up, and I'll stream myself going to a bar and just walking around. And we'll see what the bar scene is like in Leafistan. My particular town or city, well, it's a small city, is whiter than most Canadian cities these days. So actually, it won't be completely filled with ethnics. But I would not be surprised if there are some ethnics. Yeah. Zoomers don't drink at all. Yeah, because they're too busy vaping and smoking weed. Well, yeah, but vaping and smoking weed is an isolating activity, right, for the most part. Like, when people drink alcohol, their inhibitions drop. They become more... It's known as a social lubricant for that reason, right? Where their inhibitions drop, they become more willing to interact with each other. And it can really help bring people together who would otherwise be too awkward to engage socially. Like, you see this a lot in Northern Europe because Scandinavians are super autistic and socially anxious, so they just get completely shit-faced in order to interact normally with each other. And we do that here too. Or we did. But marijuana, weed, is very much a downer drug. Like, it... like, the times that I was on it, I used to smoke a lot of it when I was during lockdown because there was nothing else to do. I eventually developed a super extreme intolerance for it, so I can't even touch it anymore. Like, it makes me feel like I have a heart attack if I even get a whiff of it now. It's really strange. But before then, what I would notice is that it would just unfocus me. I would start zoning out and not really dozing off, but I would just sort of wander in my own mind. There was no way that, like, it would make me less social, if anything. I would be less interested in interacting with people. Because I would find things more interesting or more amusing, funnier than otherwise. So I could just be completely contented doing my own thing if I was baked. So that's been my experience anyways. It's not a social drug. And I don't know. Now, I would say it's not contributing to the Zoomer problem because the Zoomer problem is primarily a demographic and cultural issue. Like, I don't think the presence of weed or absence of it would make a difference. Because, I mean, look at Jamaica. Like, Jamaica's had weed all for decades and decades as like a very mainstream drug. And they haven't had the same problems that we're having until now. Like, you're seeing the same phenomenon happen everywhere, including the Caribbean. Like, it's catching up. They were delayed, but it's catching up to them. Zoomers replaced alcohol with weed. Weed is a much better cope than alcohol, so I have to agree with the Zoomers on this. It's a better cope in the sense that it's less physically harmful to your health. But I would still say that it's a cope that will isolate you socially. Right? The people that you're talking about who are smoking weed, they're smoking weed they're going together as a group and they're smoking weed as a group. So they're already in a group before they get high. And then they're still interacting with each other afterwards. Whereas for Zoomers, the vast majority of them are just alone in their own rooms. And it's a way of helping them feel comfortable being isolated, is what I've found. Yeah, Tyrones get many girls early on by giving girls free weed to get that right. Well, yeah, that's one of the ways that a lot of these guys can get foids is they'll just give them drugs. I seen that myself firsthand. I knew this Jamaican guy who had like these two live-in white girls, and they were completely like fucked up on drugs. I remember because I fixed some devices for him. I fixed his phone for him, and when I was delivering his phone, there's these two white girls there, and they had the most, I don't know how to describe it. Like, I've never seen skin look that awful in terms of the complexion. Like, I'm not talking acne or whatever. Like, it looked like they looked like corpses, basically. Like, they looked like the living dead in terms of their skin complexion, which obviously is a sign of some kind of severe drug use. But he had them basically as live-in servants, and was supplying them with drugs. What are you going to do? I used to be a pothead for years. Suddenly, out of nowhere, I would get panic attacks and thought I was having a heart attack or a stroke. Glad it happened. Yeah, that's my experience too. It was all of a sudden out of nowhere. I suddenly cannot tolerate it. I just cannot handle it. And I'm rather glad, because it is, like, the main problem with weed is that it can make you comfortable doing nothing, and then because you're doing nothing, and then once the weed is out of your system, you'll start feeling anxious about not doing what you were supposed to be doing, or falling behind on whatever your goals were in life, and then that drives you to use more weed to push that feeling away, and it becomes like a dependency issue. And that was, so in that sense, it was actually quite good that I lost my tolerance for it. Yeah, it was interacting with a chill Becky on Discord my age, white just like me, and we made plans to hang outside of Discord and never did until she stays in VCs for 10 hours a day. Oh well, lol. She smokes a lot of weed. Yeah. Well, I remember that's what I would do during the Incelmatics days. Like half the time, if any of you guys were around during Incelmatics, I was fucking baked out of my mind. Half the time. Including, okay, here's a fun fact. I think I was actually stoned when I did my first live appearance on Incelmatics. And you can kind of tell by my voice. I sound a little bit off. But yeah, since the end of lockdowns, I've never gotten anywhere near this stuff. I just can't. And it's for the reasons that I described. And yeah, I used to be okay about smoking weed, as in like legalizing it. Like I was one of these people who was like, who cares? Just let people do whatever. It's not really harmful, Like, it has some increase in psychosis for people that are already prone to schizophrenia, but that's a pretty tiny percentage. I was just like, whatever, who cares? It's like alcohol. That's what I was thinking. But then you realize once you normalize a cope, it becomes integrated into the culture. And it's a problem that Jamaica has had for a long time, where weed is so heavily integrated into their culture that it kind of fucks up the entire society, where like everybody's smoking weed consistently, regularly, and it starts to affect the social norms and behaviors of the culture, where you can't really get any shit done. You end up having like this sort of lazy, carefree culture, which seems nice, but then, if your per capita income is $6,000 a year, like everybody's basically a shit poor subsistence farmer and just get stoned all day whenever they're not subsistence farming. That's just not a way to live. You can't do anything productive long term. And I'm seeing this effect in Canada. Like, there was this post on Reddit I saw where this guy was just posting like, man, if I didn't have access to smoking weed every day, he didn't say go ER, but basically that's what he was saying. He was like, I would fucking blow my own brains out. He would say stuff like that. No, and I'm pretty sure this was a white guy too. But he was basically, like, he was saying, like, the only way that I can cope with my miserable life is by having weed every single day. And, it kind of reminded me of when we had the lockdowns up here in Canada. Like, our lockdowns were stricter than pretty much anything in the United States. Like, they were really, really extreme. Not quite as bad as Australia, but still really bad. But there were 2 locations that remained open. The liquor stores and the weed shops. Those remained open. Why is that? Well, this is how you pacify a population. Insel Maddox was amazing. Sucks to lose first. I hope he's happy with his black girl. I don't know about that. Yeah, I mean, if that's what happened, I lost touch with him after Insel Maddox. But yeah, if he got with a Naomi, good luck to him on that. Yeah. Drives me crazy is how many Gen Z women are now going their own way, locked in their rooms, reading manga, watching anime online all day. Even Chad's no longer interests them after enough pump and dumps. Dude, I have seen some weird shit from this youngest batch of Zoomers, like the teenagers. I have seen like attractive Zoomer foids. We're talking like 6 out of 10, even or plus, with bull dykes. Like actual, like, there was this one I saw. She was like 5'5" and thin and sort of had like a goth kind of style to her, like dyed black hair and whatever. And she was with this butch lesbian who looked like she was in her early 20s. And she had like the stupid hairstyle they'll do where they'll shave the sides of they'll do like a mullet. And she has it, but she was only like 5'6". And I'm thinking like, what the hell is going on here? And then I saw another couple like that. I saw another couple where it was a teenage Zoomer girl with a same age or close to the same age butch lesbian. Dude, we're getting fucking mogged by lesbians or by trans men or whatever. It's crazy. But just to go back to what I was talking about with X, like how the algorithm feeds you rage bait, and because you interact with it the most, it's going to feed you more and more of it. I have a strong suspicion that this is also happening for women, because I remember on my other account where I was LARPing as a feminist, I would get like female-oriented rage bait. And the difference was I usually didn't naturally interact with it because I'm not a foid, right? So like they would do stuff about how, all men just want to surprise snuggle and harass women, or they just want to enslave women. When they say they want a trad wife, they mean they want a girl that is basically a whore for them, but no one else. And then they hate women that actually like sex. Like it was stuff like this. Or they would a really popular thing for the feminists to do is they'll post like some random story of a guy murdering his girlfriend or murdering his wife or whatever, and then they'll just say like, they'll characterize it as if like all men are doing this, and that's one that they really love doing that, and it really feeds into them. And you can tell, like, if you follow some of these accounts, like there's this one called America, I think is her account name. She does nothing but post gender war bait, like from the female perspective, gender war bait nonstop. And a lot of women follow her. She's like the female version of Garbage Human. Garbage Human on X, where he just posts nothing but like black dudes with white chicks, and it's like a total paid post. And he'll get a whole ton of interaction because obviously this is rage bait, right? What's this? Can you finally apologize to Dash? And he was correct all along for 6 years straight. Well, what was he correct about? I don't even really know much about what he says because he never interacted with me. I know that he did a thing. Wasn't he like, that he said like Asian guys were, it was like just be Asian or something? Which actually, to be honest with you, of all the groups that get fucked over, I would say Asians are worse because I've seen 2 separate occasions of Asian chicks with Indian guys in my mall escapades. The first example, it was like a 5'4" Asian foid with a 5'5" curry, and he was also ugly and fat. And then the second example, it was the weirdest thing I saw, and this was actually this week or earlier this week. It was a like a 4'11" or 5' nothing. Like she was tiny, petite Ricefroid, and she was actually kind of cute too. And she was with a like a 5'10", fat, ugly, like dressed like shit Jeet, who had, and this is where it gets really strange. He had his hand around the back of her neck and was sort of like holding the back of her neck, not in like an aggressive way, but just kind of like resting his hand, holding the back of her neck, like physically holding it, not just resting on her shoulder or whatever, or having his arm around her, holding the back of her neck and walking. And she was obviously fine with it, like they were together. It was the weirdest shit I ever saw. When I saw that, it kind of like fucked up the rest of my day, because I was like, what the hell is going on here? I was sort of looking at myself in the mirror and I was like, God damn. Like, is there something wrong here? Like, yeah, outliers exist. Outliers always exist. But man, was that a fucking crazy outlier. It blew my mind. Like Ricefroids, because, okay, what I've noticed with ethnics that get with white women, because I will say that you see more ethnics with white women than white men with ethnic foids. But what you do notice with them is that they typically mog the foid, and the foid is usually like a 5 or below. Where like they'll typically either be taller or they'll have better face, or some other characteristic. Like, it kind of makes sense in your mind. You're like, okay, I could see why she'd be into him based on his looks. But when it comes to these Asian foids, I find it impossible to explain why they get with these chopped as fuck dudes. Sounds like you're in Alberta. In Richmond or Vancouver, BC, Asian men are top in terms of desirability to women. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I've never been in BC, so maybe that's correct. I can just tell you I've been all over Ontario, and that's not what I've seen, including in Richmond Hill, which is pretty heavily Asian. I think the problem with Asians is that they're naturally introverted culture. So, like, it's one of the weird things I remember seeing was how the Japanese interpreted Valentine's Day. Because, you know, on Valentine's Day, it's always you're supposed to get something for the chick. And, like, it's pretty much a female-focused holiday. Whereas when the Japanese assimilated it, they kind of transformed it into a... like, the woman has to make the first move. In... I believe it's called... There's the gift giving that the woman does first, and then the man is supposed to reciprocate. And they'll do it. It's almost like customary, where you just buy gifts for people as like a token of, like that you respect them. It's not even like a romantic thing. And then there's White Day, which I think is the day that the men have to buy gifts in return. But it's like the concept of a man just going out of his way to pursue a woman is very unusual in a lot of these Asian cultures. And I think that this is one of the main things that fucks them over. When it comes to whites, I think it's primarily the demoralization from the mainstream culture being very hostile. So it's like, it's a similar effect in some ways, but it's a different cause. I think the West will be reverse China, where the women will abort the males and keep the female babies. We've already seen that. There was an article about this, where it was like these it was like one of these mainstream newspapers that did an article on it, talking about how there's a growing preference for daughters over sons when it comes to children being born, and particularly artificial insemination. And actually, you're even seeing this in China too, by the way. And there was all these manosphere types that were making all of these comments like, "Oh, this is horrible. It's over. This is misandry. This is terrible." And I'm just thinking to myself, dude, imagine if you are like, imagine if there's like a moidicide of all the male fetuses, or like 90% of the male fetuses, and you're like one of the 10% of guys that are born in your generation that's 90% female. Like, dude, that's literally fucking paradise. It's kind of like the Hunger Games while you're being conceived, where most of you get culled, but then the ones that survive are literally living in paradise. Like, how is that in any way a negative? Like, dude, we should be advocating for as many female births and as few male births as possible. The world would balance itself out if we did that. Half the white Zoomers I know are dating ethnic voids. Maybe. I have seen a few I've seen a few cases of white guys dating black voids. I think I saw two. Yeah, I saw two cases of it, and in both cases, it was like the reverse of what you see with the black guys or the white voids, where it was the white guy was like, one example I can think of. He was tall. He was like 6'1", but he was a fat ass, and like he just didn't look that great. He kind of looked like if you could imagine like the typical like yokel kind of white guy who's like got his pickup truck and he playing country music, he talking about the farm and drinking a beer, like he's that kind of looking guy. And then this black chick that was like thin but had a big ass, and she had a nice face too, but she was like black. She was like 100% African. I saw one of those at a mall that I was at, but it's pretty rare. Like most of the time I would have to say it's the other way around. Again, it's because you don't see average and below average white Zoomer guys. They're just not in public. They don't go out in public. They bedrot, I think, to a large extent. No, I'm in Ontario. Though I'm trying to avoid being too specific, you know? Look, I don't think that anything bad will happen if I were to specify my city, but I think it's probably safer to avoid that if possible. Is what I'm thinking. We've noticed from the reverse passport bros, American pretty boys bringing wives from Eastern Europe, e.g. Ukraine, Belarus, Poland, Russia. Well, I think that's been happening for a while. Like, I've known guys that were born here. It's actually really funny because I remember going through my my yearbook photos from when I was in grade 1, grade 2, like, because they would do school photos for the grades, right? And I remember I thought that I was growing up with all these white kids that were like me. But then when I actually looked at their surnames, or I looked at their parents, I realized they were like Nastia, Anastasia, Tanya. There was one chick that was named Ting Ting. Well, no, that one was obvious. She was Chinese. But like there were a lot of Slavs that were there, and half Slavs that I didn't realize. Now, obviously, they're white. I'm not saying they're not white, but I figured that they were, because they looked like us, right? I figured that they were Western European. But no, there were a lot of Eastern Europeans, especially after the Soviet Union collapsed. After the fall of communism, you had especially a lot of women pouring into, getting poached by Westerners, because that was basically the cultural and economic dominance of Western Europe and America was at its all-time high. I mean, you already doxed yourself. I don't think so. Like, can you guess my first and last name? And do you have a picture of my face? I don't think so. But you guys, if you do look at previous streams, you'll know which city I reside in. You're going to speak about what is happening with Android. Does anybody know shit about Android? Well, see, that's more of a tech-focused thing, and I can't really add much about it. So in the UK, apparently they're trying to push a censorship program, or not a censorship program. They're trying to push a where you have to dox yourself, and they're pushing it onto the actual firmware of the devices. And allegedly, this is going to basically be hard-coded into devices that are imported into the UK and sold in the UK. But, I mean, the solution would obviously be just buy a Chinese device from China and just have it shipped over. And then jailbreak it, because Chinese devices will have that option, right? That's the easy solution. There isn't a solution that normies will be friendly towards, because normies are stupid. Right? A critical mass of women got into institutions and companies, and older men simped to them to push DEI, and it created a feedback loop where women get promoted at men and relish in seeing men underemployed. Yeah, you know what's crazy is this happened a while ago. Okay, like this was the thing in the 80s and 90s. Like the 90s is when it really took off. But I have 4 sisters. 3 out of 4 of them make more than their husbands do. And they're in their 50s. So they've been married for like 25 years. And they're the breadwinners in their family. And in some cases, like I have one sister who has the same job as her husband, but she just got promoted way faster because it was in a field that was mostly men. It was involving it was a type of job that was related to nuclear energy. I'll just say that much, and so it was pretty male dominated at the time, anyways. And she ended up just getting promoted faster. And same with one of my other sisters who got into IT, and she ended up as a manager of a tech division. And, you know, to be fair, I mean, the thing about my sisters is that they're kind of masculine in their psychology. So my sister that was involved in tech management actually is pretty good at her job, all things considered. But that also is, she's not really a feminine woman either. Like, she's kind of like one of those type of women that you'll see them in tech or other STEM fields where they're not really feminine at all, and they're not really attractive as a result as women, but they can sort of function in a male-dominated sphere because they're male-brained in some ways, right? Brampton, Canada will always be a funny name. Yes, Brampton. Here's some trivia. Here's some Mercer trivia. Okay, my mother's side of the family, they own a large section of property along a lake called Heart Lake. And Heart Lake, I actually have photos of myself as a child and it was a big, like, well-made cottage too. Like, it was, like, you could actually live there if you wanted to. Like, it was properly insulated and everything. But I have photos of myself at this cottage as a kid. So this is in the late 90s, early 2000s. And nowadays, if you actually look at the location, it's smack dab in the middle of Brampton. It's right there in Brampton. So I'm actually terrified to go back there now, 20 years later, and take a look around and see what it's turned into since then. Because Brampton is not the same as it was in the 90s and 2000s, as you know. His employers just want bitches and bots in the office. Yeah, they do, 100%. Well, I mean, a lot of these boomers, there's this trend on X that you're seeing where, and I have to agree with it, that they're actually targeting, like millennials and Zoomer guys are pointing out the fact that boomer men have this weird psychological issue with their own sons, where there's like this antipathy towards their own sons, and this sort of weird extreme coddling of their daughters. Like, it's girl dads, but there's almost like a quasi romantic element to it in a weird way, where they're like projecting their own, because like most boomers got divorced, right? So, and the way it was described is like, your daughter is basically a copy of your wife, but unlike your wife, she actually genuinely loves you because she's your daughter. And so they developed this sort of weird enmeshed relationship with their daughters, where they view their daughters as perfect and their sons as just sort of subhuman trash, you know? And this phenomenon is filtered out throughout the economy, where you'll see guys, like you'll see these boomers, for their sons, they'll talk about, oh, just go into a trade, which, you know, in and of itself is not bad advice, going into a trade. But if you ask them what trade they want their daughters to go into, they'll like go ballistic and lose their shit, and they'll say, no, my daughter went to university and she's a this or that. Like, they very clearly are much more invested in their daughters' futures than their sons, you know. And it seems to be a uniquely Zoomer, or not Zoomer, but boomer phenomenon, and the Zoomers are the ones that have to deal with it, Anyways, though, guys, I'm going to cut it short a little bit now because, unfortunately, with this full-time job, I don't have anywhere near the amount of free time I used to have. So I'm going to be doing my streams in 2 hours instead of 3. But appreciate you guys coming on. I wish I could have talked a little more about the happening in Montreal, but I was wisely advised by another Leaf to try and sort of skim the topic and not really dive too much into it. Maybe once I am able to escape Canada and live somewhere else, I will be able to talk about stuff. But yeah, it's great talking to you guys, and talk to you guys later.